Oh, Father Peter, thank you so much for those words at the beginning. I hardly recognised myself in them, but it was very, very fine. Thank you. I do thank you and Archbishop Malcolm and all of you for inviting me to speak this evening. The topic, as you can see there, the church in an individualistic society. And whilst considering the, if you like, the philosophical and theological aspects of this, given that this talk is a contribution to the Archdiocesan Synod, I also want to root all of it in the pastoral context. So I'm going to really focus on 3 points. First of all, something on the secular individualistic culture that we live in. And then secondly, how the church might respond. And then thirdly, some practical measures that as Catholics we might take. So first of all, living in a secular individualistic culture. I found this sort of collage of photographs on the internet. It shows a church that's been converted into a luxury home. I thought it might be quite a good sort of image just to have in the back of our mind for a moment. So why is it that these days the church seems to be full of the elderly? Where are the young? Why is it that out of, say, 40 children for First Holy Communion, only 2 go to Mass? Why is it, as Stephen Bullivant noted in his recent book, Mass Exodus, so few Catholics nowadays practice the faith? In the Diocese of Portsmouth, just 13%. Why is it that almost half of those undertaking the RCIA process subsequently lapse? Why is it, as Sherry Waddell observes in her Forming Intentional Disciples, almost 40% of the congregation, even leading parishioners, even those in upfront parish ministries, are unsure God exists, that God is personal, that they can have a life-changing relationship with him. Over the last 5 or 6 decades, Britain has quietly undergone a massive religious revolution, a shift arguably comparable in historical significance to that of the Reformation. Britain has become secular, a land of mass unbelief. In his recent book, Becoming Atheist, Humanism and the Secular West, the sociologist Callum Brown charts the quiet but spectacular collapse of religion following the cultural, social and sexual revolutions of what he calls the long 60s, that is from the mid-1950s to the mid-1970s. The swinging 60s saw the emergence of youth culture, the music of the Beatles, the contraceptive pill, the legalization of abortion and homosexuality, the women's liberation movement, easier divorce, and so on, which subsequently have led to the demise of the traditional family. In his earlier book, The Death of Christian Britain, Callum Brown correlated the decline of Christianity with the changing social status of women, with new attitudes towards sex, fertility, education, and work. The upshot of all of this is that the British have now largely lost faith. They've dropped their Christian beliefs, church connections, religious practices, and millions now live, to use the scholastic phrase et si Deus non daretur, as if there is no God. The 2011 National Census, data from the 2015 British Social Attitudes Survey confirm that 48% of the population, rather than in the past they would have said C of E or Anglican or whatever, they now say they are nons. That's not nuns, but nons. People of no religion. And that can mean anything from explicit atheism or agnosticism to humanism and to indifference. No longer Christian, a secular culture now prevails, although the terms secular, secularism, secularization, like individualism and materialistic, are ill-defined and often a little watery. Secularism is more an attitude or an atmosphere than a fully worked out philosophy or system of thought. Essentially, it means a concern with the saeculum, the world, this world, rather than the next. Secularism is about living life horizontally, without God and without the vertical dimension of religion, without, to use the phrase of Peter Berger, a sacred canopy. This loss of religion, however, is not to suggest the loss of values. The new culture is humanistic. It has strong liberal values. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Justice, equality, respect for all, regardless of race, gender, disability, the recognition of all sexualities, the freedom to determine fertility and family, a woman's right to choose, the right to assisted suicide or dignity in dying, and increasingly a concern for ecology and climate. It esteems being, and this is the phrase they use, good without God. Many of these values, of course, are post-Christian values, but they're now freewheeling, they're stripped from their theological moorings. Secularism permits religion, but it marginalizes and ring-fences it to the private domain. Its key axiom is a strict separation of church and state, religion and politics. And whilst most people are indifferent, live and let live, some, such as Stonewall and the National Secular Society, deride Christianity, seeking systematically to exclude religious expression from schools, institutions, and public life. Not freedom of religion, but freedom from religion. But generally, as long as behaviour remains within the law, policymakers adopt a neutral attitude towards religions. Religion, the meaning of life, values to do with self, sexuality, the family, what is morally right, the existence of God and life after death, is ring-fenced and treated as a private affair. Excuse me. Even so, religion is never far away. Scratch the surface and water wells up. Christian beliefs and values still linger. They surface on public occasions, at royal weddings and at funerals. Funerals are very popular today. Since 9/11, the world's situation has changed and the political issue of religion has become much more discussed. In Western Europe, Christianity is in decline, but in other parts of the world, religion, including Christianity, is in the ascendant. Islam is growing stronger, so too is Buddhism. Globalization has made the world smaller. Thanks to easier travel, the internet, smartphones, there's now greater contact between peoples. Modern Britain has experienced substantial immigration with a plurality of religions, a supermarket of religions on everyone's doorstep. In the Diocese of Portsmouth, our mass attendance has remained stable because the Anglo-Irish, most of whom have now lapsed, have been replaced by Poles, Keralans, Filipinos, and Nigerians. And today, many parts of Britain are thoroughly multicultural and potentially multi-religious. Secularism, however, has three fatal or self-defeating flaws. First of all, a distorted anthropology or understanding of what it means to be human. Spirituality, religion, prayer, religious expression are intrinsic to every human being. To deny, ignore, or truncate the religious sense is to skew human development and restrict freedom of conscience. Moreover, religion grounds ethics, and so a loss of religion dissolves the foundations of morality. Without religion and the natural law, novel freewheeling concepts of right and wrong, of sexuality and family life, of the dignity and value of human life begin to emerge. To lose God is to lose man, as St. John Paul II argued. Without religion, humans no longer see themselves as creatures, but as Promethean creators. And consequently, a second flaw, secularism leads to what Pope Benedict called the dictatorship of relativism. Relativism is the view that truth is relative. What's true for you is not true for me. Because truth has no basis in religion or the natural law, it depends on what I think or even what I feel. The spectre of dictatorship arises when the state endorses one group's claims over another group's. And this can be seen in all the recent debates about abortion or gay marriage and assisted suicide. What is good or right is now determined by lawyers. A growing totalitarianism in secular societies is inevitable as the loss of faith dissolves the foundations of ethics. Think of the British legal system, moulded over centuries by Christianity and the natural law. Today, it's crafted by politicians and lawmakers, educators, healthcare professionals, pressure groups, media and business interests, for whom the common traditional values have little weight. They lobby for what's expedient, or even what they can get away with. The law is now increasingly adrift, whilst an ever-rising tide of bureaucratic rules and regulations is enforced that express the will of the legislator, the will of campaigners, the will of a focus group. And thirdly, secularism gives rise to bogus epistemologies, that is, theories about knowledge. The demise of religion, as St. John Paul II argued in Fides et Ratio, his encyclical letter on the relationship of faith and reason, leads logically to the demise of reason. This is the basis of the individualism so characteristic of our modern society. Without reason and without religion, nihilism and hedonism, or escapism and pleasure, entertainment, inevitably dominate. The alternative reaction is the sola ratio of scientism, an excessive trust in science and technology. More than anything else, I can see this even in our Catholic schools, more than anything else, a distorted view of science has now come to pervade British education, the media, and popular culture. It's the belief that science alone gives us facts, it gives us truth, whereas religion, ethics, wisdom, common sense, tradition, other forms of knowledge are personal predilections, like one's taste in music. Secularism thus deprives the British of the spiritual resources they might easily turn to. While laudably many new minority religions have been accommodated, Christianity, the religion of the majority, has been relegated now as one possible religion amongst others. Replacing in schools the study of Christianity with comparative religion leaves students religiously illiterate. Today's youth have little basic knowledge of Britain's Christian heritage or even her Christmas carols. Cut off from their roots, they drift. Disaffected, they'll become prey to radicalisation. In the recent general election, there was a lot of talk about Brexit, the NHS, HS2, and so on, but nothing about the most radical poverty of all, the lack of a proper relationship with God. There was nothing on supporting spirituality, religion, faith communities, churches, and so on. Every human being aspires to be happy, to be loved, to belong, to live forever. Humans are built for this. Yet, as St. Augustine once said, none of this is possible without a relationship with God. And that's where Christianity, of course, as we believe, responds to humanity's deepest longings. It gives friendship with Christ, immortality, a sense of belonging within his body, the church. It gives the grace, energy, and power to do the impossible, to bear sickness, suffering, sadness, even death. It gives meaning and purpose. It grounds ethics. It builds community. It encourages self-sacrifice and service of the poor. It offers the glue that fosters social cohesion. Catholics face many challenges in Britain, but surely the greatest is secularism, living in a secular culture, breathing a secular atmosphere. So how might the church respond? Reading the Catholic press might suggest that the church faces a crisis of institution. If only the ordination of women deacons was permitted, or celibacy became optional, or the divorced and remarried were readmitted to the sacraments, if only the Latin Mass was restored, or the previous translation of the Roman Missal, all would be well. All these are, of course, important matters, but the real and most urgent challenge the church faces is not a crisis of institution, but a crisis of faith. It's the crisis of faith in secular culture and the corresponding impact of that crisis of faith on the life of the church. In his 1962 address opening the Second Vatican Council, Pope John XXIII stated that the Council's purpose was to evangelize more effectively the modern world. The internal change in the church was needed for the sake of the external outreach. In the immediate aftermath of the Council, Catholics, of course, became self-absorbed with changing structures. But in 1975, after the Synod of Bishops the year before, Pope Paul VI issued a document called Evangelii Nunciandi, which sought to infuse the whole church with a new missionary consciousness. In it, he famously said, "Evangelizing is the grace and vocation proper to the church, her deepest identity. The church exists to evangelize, that is, to preach and teach, to be the channel of the gift of grace." In effect, Evangelii Nunciandi would reject a static institutional maintenance model of the church in favor of a more missionary-minded evangelistic approach, what George Weigel calls an evangelical Catholicism. And this new missionary awareness became central to St. John Paul II and to Pope Benedict, who often spoke of the role of faith within Western society, and to Pope Francis, who in Evangelii Gaudium and Laudato Si has tethered mission to human need, service of the poor, and an integral ecology. Now, against this general background, JP2, in an address in 1983, coined a new theological term. What is needed today, he said, is a new evangelization. An evangelization new in its ardor, new in its methods, and new in its expression. He had in mind a growing disquiet about the situation of the church in Europe, where countries of ancient Christian origin like France and Germany were being rapidly de-Christianized. The rise of secularism, atheism, and indifferentism was turning the church into a minority. The gospel was being preached, sacraments were being conferred, but people were lapsing from practice. They were not in a life-changing relationship with Jesus Christ. A new evangelization and a re-evangelization was needed. The term new evangelization then began to appear very frequently in Vatican documents and was taken up by Pope Benedict and by Pope Francis. Indeed, in 2010, Benedict established a pontifical council for new evangelization and devoted the 2012 Synod of Bishops to that theme. Its final propositions formed the basis of Evangelii Gaudium, Pope Francis's 2015 apostolic exhortation that summed up the work of the Synod and enhanced it with considerations of his own. So what is this new evangelization? Well, evangelization, you know this from the Greek euangelion, glad tidings, or euangelizomai, to announce good news, means essentially the spirit-filled presentation of the person of Jesus Christ and his gospel in such a way as to elicit a faith response in the recipient, by which they too encounter Jesus for themselves and convert their life and enter into a lifelong discipleship and friendship with him within his body, the church. Evangelization means a life-changing encounter with Jesus Christ. That's basically, and it's enabling a person to hear that and receive that gospel and meet the Lord for themselves. Now, classically, this was meant to happen over time as a person was brought up within a Catholic family, as they received the sacraments, baptism, confession, First Holy Communion, confirmation, through Catholic schooling, through going to Mass, through saying set prayers in the morning and in the evening, by becoming involved in the life of the parish, perhaps an altar server or a reader, through undertaking Catholic charity work, by marrying another Catholic, and by living in accord with the teachings of the Church. But it's precisely this model of evangelization that's largely now broken down. The gospel has been preached, but thwarted. Many have been baptized, but they do not practice. Many have been sacramentalized, but are they evangelized? They may still be loosely connected with the church. You know, they want to get their children in the Catholic school and so on, but they're not themselves apparently in, or it appears, in a living personal relationship with Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. And that's why a new model is needed, an evangelization, new in its ardor, new in its methods, new in its expression. It's important to say, when we use the term evangelization, it's always a two-way movement. It's ad intra and ad extra. It's like breathing in and breathing out. Evangelization is ad intra. It's about Christians themselves being evangelized, growing and deepening in their faith, and that's a lifelong journey. But evangelization is also ad extra. It's Christians reaching out to others to propose to them the good news. It's also important to note that new evangelization, not a program, we can't get it on a CD or something or take it off out of a box file. In his 2001 apostolic letter opening the millennium, John Paul II said, "We're not seduced by the naive expectation that faced with the great challenges of our time, we shall find some magic formula. No, we shall not be saved by a formula, but by a person, and by the assurance he gives us, I am with you." It's not therefore a matter of inventing a new program. So not a program, but a person. Evangelization is about encounter, an event, personally entering into friendship with Jesus Christ and becoming his disciple. From this at the same time, of course, it's about sharing Christ with others and attracting them to him. Now, to speak in this way, for many, is baffling. Catholics can usually do church, but not Christ. They can talk about their parish and their school, their priest, the children making the first communion, but they cannot easily give a testimony or speak about their faith or explain what they believe or speak of their friendship with Christ. They know about Friday abstinence or the papacy, the church's moral teachings on sex and abortion. They may well be able to recite prayers and novenas, but faith, spirituality, a personal love for God, why Christ died, what it means to say Christ is risen, a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, Lord and Saviour, isn't that sounding a bit Protestant? You see, this challenge also applies to our parishes and our schools. Since Vatican II, great efforts have gone into developing new structures, building up the church, creating parish communities, amalgamating parishes, enabling lay ministries. But during this period, contemporary culture, not least the media, has become post-religious, even hostile, Christophobic. The clergy abuse crisis has added immeasurably to this negativity. As if for safety, many Catholics retreat. Clergy now see themselves as chaplains to the Catholic community. Many faithful see themselves as consumers of the services being provided. Some parishes have become inward-looking, like members' clubs. Churches once always open are now locked. James Mallon, in his book Divine Renovation, develops many of these themes from his own parochial experience, including the bingo club that block-booked the parish centre, meaning that it could never be used for groups of newcomers. See, the church does not exist to create community, but communion. The church does not exist to create lay ministries, but lay mission. The church does not exist, as Pope Francis puts it, to be self-referential, a spiritual disease, he says, that causes the church to become sick and elderly, but to go out onto the margins to serve the needy. In his 2013 Apostolic Exhortation Evangelii Gaudium, he says, "I dream of a missionary option, that is, a missionary impulse capable of transforming everything, so that the church's customs, ways of doing things, times and schedules, language and structures can be suitably channeled for the evangelization of today's world rather than for her self-preservation." The crisis the church faces is not principally a crisis of institution. It's a crisis of faith, of belief. The church needs to take seriously the new culture of secularism and atheism that's arisen over and continuing to dominate. A key reason for the attrition of faith and the collapse of practice in Catholic families, schools and parishes over the years since Vatican II has been a doe-eyed lack of awareness of culture. Catholics need to have the courage to be different, to be a distinctive community, to be countercultural. And evangelization, new in its art, new in its methods, new in its expression, might not mean doing lots of new things, but it certainly means doing the things that we do, but in a new way. It certainly implies a new passion for the faith, so that Catholics will naturally reach out to others. It means new ways of communicating the gospel, the use of new media, new methods. It means too new expressions and faith of groups and communities for the 21st century. That might seem very challenging, yet the question of God, spirituality, the desire for happiness and love, for a sense of belonging, for immortality, is embedded and operative in every human heart, even if at times overlaid by the busyness and noise of life. The task of new evangelization is to direct that innate desire towards the only person who can fulfill it, namely Jesus Christ. So, we could have many different proposals, but I'm going to put forward 3 practical proposals here. If you can just bear with me, it's a kind of conclusion of the talk. I say there could be other things as well. I do think the synodal process is a fantastic vehicle for dealing with all of these things, really. But I'm just going to say here that I think going forward, the first thing is deepening faith, to deepen faith. I think affront secularism, the most effective witness is for every Catholic to grow in faith, to become more holy, to be what they're meant to be an authentic, credible witness, to be can-do disciples of Jesus Christ who put their faith into action, not least in the service of the poor and needy. And that means prayer. It means developing a more personal relationship with God and acquiring a deeper knowledge of the faith. So intellectually, this is about understanding faith better through the usual means of Bible study or spiritual reading, right? Readings that deepen ardour and nourish the mind and heart. A new apologetics is needed that can pinpoint the flaws of secularism, particularly taking the language of rights and freedom and responsibility and reorienting and filling them out in an authentic fashion, but also to rebut those popular myths about science, especially, I would say, in schools, as well as addressing the hot-button issues of sex, authority, and human dignity, to speak about the positive role of religion within human living, and to tackle the drift towards totalitarianism and restrictions on religious expression. So there's an intellectual component here, but there's also a spiritual component. Opportunities for spiritual growth need to be developed. As Sherry Waddell notes, a significant minority of Catholics convert to evangelicalism. It's not because of church teachings or the abuse crisis or a marriage issue or even the lively worship style that evangelical churches have, but it's because they say fundamentally their spiritual needs are not being met in the Catholic Church or by the Catholic Church. That's a very serious challenge. Spiritual growth is about growing in love, prayer, devotion, developing a deeper personal, passionate friendship with Jesus Christ. It's no longer enough simply, as it were, to attend Sunday Mass. Everyone should belong to a faith-sharing group, maybe a Bible study or an Alpha group or a work of charity that meets regularly for prayer, formation, testimony and mutual support. The Year of the Word is a help here. In Portsmouth, we've added in 2021 a year of the Eucharist, 2 years of spiritual renewal. Another help, I was mentioning this before with Father Peter, is the Called and Gifted programme, which involves one-to-one interviews with people about their relationship with God to help them discern the gifts and charisms God has given them for mission and service. So there's the first thing, deepening faith. Now this may seem a little surprising. A second proposal, Eucharistic adoration. At the heart of the church is the presence of Jesus Christ in the Holy Eucharist. Every Catholic should find a church that's open, locate the tabernacle, and regularly spend periods of prayer in adoration. The Blessed Sacrament is not only a sacred object to be adored, but a sacred subject to be loved, Jesus Christ. And in the monstrance, we meet Jesus Christ in person. To build a real relationship with him, there's no alternative but to spending time with him. Mass, yes, but from Mass as well, time to be with Jesus in the Holy Eucharist. It's life-changing. I meet this across our diocese. I've asked all our parishes, keep your churches open, let people, do not lock Christ away from his people. See, an attitudinal shift is needed here from an ecclesiocentric worldview that's focused on the church as an institution to a Christocentric worldview focused on Christ, Lord and Saviour. Catholics need to become less absorbed with the church, with churchy things, with church structures, and more concerned with the person of Christ, with discipleship. See, the church is not here to preach the church, but Christ. Christocentricity is very difficult for many older Catholics. I include myself in that. New evangelization means shifting focus from the church of the Lord to the Lord of the church, from concern with the internal life of the church, is important, of course, to her apostolate in the world. It's a move from maintenance to mission. Moreover, catechesis and adult faith formation needs to have a far greater concern with conversion, with religion, with prayer, with experiencing God, with the purpose of fanning into a flame the natural desire for God in the human heart and directing it to the person of Jesus Christ. Surely the time has come to put all the church's resources at the service of helping people to pray, to find God, to connect with God, to commit to God, to learn the art of praying to God, to develop a real relationship with God, to acquire a strong sense of what it means to be chosen as his disciple. Churches need to be kept open for prayer. There should be leaflets on prayer. There should be courses on how to pray. And Catholics have got huge resources for this, not least in the lives of the saints and in 2 millennia of spiritual theology. And at the same time, rather than massing individuals all the time into groups, much more energy needs to be put, and this is very resource hungry, into personal accompaniment, into spiritual direction, into one-to-one guidance, in order to assist individuals to advance in their relationship with God and in their discipleship. And then a third proposal there is service and works of charity, Christian action. Evangelization must include service, charitable works, transformational action, as well as advocacy work for justice. Pope Francis in Evangelii Gaudium, our faith in Christ, who became poor and was always close to the poor and the outcast, is the basis of our concern for the integral development of society's most neglected members. Each individual Christian and every community is called to be an instrument of God for the liberation and promotion of the poor and for enabling them to be fully part of society. Catholics should be at the forefront of serving the poor and needy, those on the margins, the concern for nature, the environment, climate change, care of the homeless. every parish might ask, what does poverty mean in this place, in this community? It's quite a difficult question to ask that. You have to really think it through. What are the real needs in this locality? Who are the poor? Who are the poorest, and how might they be helped? And in this way, the Catholic community can demonstrate its faith by good works, contributing to the common good and offering practical help to those in need. After all, in St. Matthew's account of the Last Judgment, Jesus identifies himself with the poor such that in serving them, we serve him. For I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. I was a stranger, you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick, you visited me. I was in prison and you came to see me. See, many of the saints instinctively recognize this intrinsic link between mission and service. The patron of our Portsmouth youth, Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati, a teenager, he'd receive Holy Communion on his way to school, and in the evenings he'd undertake voluntary work with the SVP, the St. Vincent de Paul Society, in the slums of Turin. He once said, Jesus pays me a visit in communion every morning, and I repay him in the evening in the miserable way I can by visiting his poor. Actions speak louder than words. To be serious about mission means to be serious about service. See, many parishes and schools are inward looking. An evangelizing parish, an evangelizing school is outward looking. It's focused on service, especially of the neediest and the poorest. In Portsmouth, I'm sure it is here as well, an important development has been the establishment of Caritas, which is now inspiring, sponsoring and helping parishes, schools and individuals undertake local projects that can make a difference, like feeding the homeless or sponsoring a refugee family or running a children's project, and so on and so on. So to conclude, Callum Brown, this is the book I was quoting from before, Becoming Atheist, Humanism and the Secular West. He himself is an atheist and a humanist. He points out how secularization and the rise of atheism that's occurred over the last decades in Britain, and more generally in the West too, has been an overwhelmingly white affair. It has been led disproportionately, he shows, by those from a liberal Protestant milieu and from the liberal strands within Roman Catholicism, thus bearing out St. John Henry Newman's remark that liberalism is the halfway house between the way to Rome and the way to atheism. I think that role of liberalism in secularization, I think, would be a subject of a further study. In its 2,000-year history, the Church has never before engaged with a secular culture. It's a huge challenge to navigate, and evangelization can at times seem like flogging a dead horse. A direct consequence is that the Church is becoming much smaller. More positively, as Pope Benedict once put it, the Church in a de-Christianized Europe has to become a creative minority. Like St. Paul, she must continue to proclaim the message in season and out. Britain, in fact, is a fertile mission field. It can be hard going, but it's rare to encounter direct hostility. There's no need for despondency. Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And at this very moment, the Holy Spirit is at work in people's hearts, wooing them towards him. It's my own conviction that it's not the product that's defective, but the ability of people within a busy, consumer, individualistic culture to hear God's voice and call. Catholics have a powerful message. It's ever relevant. It's good news. It's an invitation to every single person. Our task is to communicate Christ attractively so that all may find their way to him and to that true, genuine, lasting human happiness and fulfillment for which they long. Thank you for listening.